Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's stream is going to begin with a little Super Nintendo Morse code. Actually, it sounds more like a typewriter, but I don't think any of that even made it into the microphone because I am pretty decent with noise canceling stuff. What is up, everybody? This is Jay, aka MultimediaJay. Happy Saturday. And we have a lot going on today. We're going to be talking mostly about gaming-related stuff. Particularly, this is going to be my main way in which I chime in on this whole hullabaloo with the self-destructing game consoles that's going on right now. So basically, for those of you that haven't heard this, I don't know what kind of rock you're living under if you haven't heard about this yet. But there's a hidden gotcha in the PlayStation 3 that's coming up where if the CMOS battery goes dead and your clock gets reset, you have to validate the time with the PlayStation Network to validate the licenses of all of your downloaded digital games. And the PlayStation Network has been announced that it's going to get shut down for the PS3 finally after all these years later this year. So the question everybody has is there going to be some kind of end-of-life system update that removes that DRM so your digital purchases don't get ruined if your CMOS battery dies after PlayStation Network goes down? And I got a couple of things I can say with regards to that. But first, we have a new subscriber to say thank you to. Amanda, thank you for the sub on YouTube. So these things always seem to happen when I'm offline. So it's kind of cool that people are finding the channel and they're being introduced to what it is that I'm doing. I can tell you right now, I've been on YouTube for 15 years this year. But it's not, my content has not, I'll just say right here, and some trolls be laughing their asses off, but there's really no story to it. My content has not been something that really deserved a lot of views until maybe several years ago with the tech videos. I mean, I've been recreationally involved on YouTube. That doesn't mean I don't know anything about major things that have happened. I was involved in some of the biggest, or at least as someone watching it anyways, some of the biggest issues that have been part of the growing pains of YouTube as a platform. When I first came to YouTube, Diet Coke with Mentos was the popular thing that everybody was making videos about. So there was that going on, but at the same time, there was a takedown campaign against a vlogger who was a little old lady on several medications who vlogged in a wheelchair. And because she stuttered a lot from her medications and whatnot, people made fun of her and then flagged her videos until she got taken off the platform. Then there was a counter campaign to bring her back. I've also been through the AVGN irate gamer fiasco and all the mess that caused, and then the conversion over to watch minutes in the early 2010s and the mess that caused. And I've seen a lot of things that have been, even though I was just in the audience for a lot of those, it was a really big lesson in content creation and stuff like that. Then you get today, of course, you get to be my age, having been involved in this kind of stuff for this long, and you start to really cringe at even content that people say is good. So people like the Delosaurus stuff that I do. I try watching the 2012 video, and it's one of those things that I just, how did I think that was good? Well, the answer was I was a lot less experienced back then. And that's really one of the things with content creation that you have to keep in mind. The more you get into it, the more you're going to realize that what you do is rubbish as you get better at it. So you're going to be this good, and it's going to be your best work at this point. But then a little ways down the road, you're this good, so now this looks like crap because you're now this good at this stuff because you've been learning. So it's just one of the downsides to all this. I think the same thing happens in Hollywood, too, where you have movie stars that hate some of their earlier movies, even if their earlier movies were really popular because they're just younger and less experienced. So the them of today, so to speak, can't handle the success of the them from yesteryear, if that makes any sense grammatically whatsoever. So let's talk about a few things that have been going on. My plans tonight are this stream, which is better off in the early evening thanks to the robust noise suppression that streaming offers and videos don't. Get the chores done, and then record some videos in the middle of the night. Last night, I did not get to any videos at all because this classic YouTube thing, oh man, big, huge nostalgia trip. But I now have one of the largest classic YouTube playlists on YouTube now. There's another guy, he has nostalgic videos, 283, and I've passed 300 videos now. A lot of it is because I'm incorporating a lot of videos from early YouTube series that I used to binge watch a lot, like some of the game reviews and stuff like that back then. So I still have more I could go add to the playlist to make it even larger. But it's kind of like we talked about My Decade TV last time. For My Decade TV, go to the website. Oh, yeah, I should probably mention, because My Decade TV is kind of a cleverly disguised embed of YouTube, making it look like an old television from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. If you have a neutral browser or a browser you don't use, go to My Decade TV in that browser, because if you use your main browser with your YouTube credentials in it, you're going to screw up all of your recommendations on the front page, because that's how it runs. So the algorithms are going to pick up all of this watch time for the stuff that My Decade TV has, and next thing you know, you're going to see all like 70s, 80s, and 90s stuff in your feed. So I'm actually legit curious if I can bias the algorithms towards showing me some more classic videos by watching my own classic playlist a little more, if I want like some background noise or something like, oh yeah, I remember that game review from 2007. It's just the way it is. You know, it's just the thing. You know, YouTube has evolved and it's gone in a certain direction. It's not always a good thing that YouTube evolves like it does, but we're at the point now where if people want to know what the heck I'm talking about, they need to become familiar with the content that I was introduced to YouTube with. It may not look as good, but it'll be a lot more to the point than a lot of the fluff we have today. You know, because there was no, I mean, even I like end screens, but that's really the extent of it. And one of the reasons, by the way, you know, we've got some music here. Why don't we just play it? You know what? We could also add in, let's add in the full YTAL. Let's add in the full YTAL. We are streaming on YouTube, and I ran into yet more Twitch drama. So I really don't see any reason anytime soon why I should be streaming on Twitch. It's just, I can't justify it. I just can't. So there was another thing among more Twitch streamers in whatever this group is that does this crap, where I don't like this person, unfollow them on Twitter or I'm going to kick you out of my Discord. Like, really? Again, I'm almost thinking Twitch needs to, I think the reason why I want to support Twitch's existence is so it can be like a place for all of these drama-prone people who flip out on Twitter to be all like penned up in a certain place. But Twitch, to an extent, has a similar thing with YouTube. They have a similar issue with YouTube in that respect. You can click to some different streamers and get a completely different experience from them than the people who cause all the drama on Twitch. So by all means, folks, if a Twitch streamer is ticking you off, use those often not used browse features and watch how quickly the genre changes and you like what you see better. You know, and you may actually change who you're sub to and who you follow as a result of this sort of stuff. Let's get some music playing here, and let's just begin with something Tchaikovsky. Okay, how about something? Yeah. Oh, and it bounced back over to Stream Beats Synthwave. What are you gonna do? So, the gotcha that recently made the news was regarding the CMOS battery in the PlayStation 3. It eventually dies and you have to replace it. And if it happens after the PlayStation Network goes down, it invalidates the DRM and stuff because you can't get the time verified with PlayStation Network. Some really old DRM to prevent things like hacked consoles and stuff from years gone by. There's a whole video on this. I shared it on Twitter. You folks have probably seen it by now if you're following this issue. But I'm just here today. I just want to remind Sony of a very blunt lesson from video gaming history. Sony? Howdy. This is Jay, aka MultimediaJay, and this is my original Super Nintendo from the early 1990s. Christmas of, I believe, 93 or 94, something like that. It was a super set, $150 in 1990s money, which correlates to what today? Why don't we just look that up? They open another browser here. 150 USD in 1990. We'll go with 93 on this. Factor out a little bit more inflation. Inflation calculator, it comes out to... Why do I have to click extra button? $275 today. So, this thing... Let's see. So this thing in the early 1990s was the equivalent price-wise of something similar to a Nintendo Switch today. Now, this thing is from the early 1990s. I can still put a cartridge in it, flip the switch, and play it. It still works. It just yellowed on the bottom because of plastic issues with Super Nintendo that are very well documented. The top still looks relatively okay, and it still plays games. So, decades later, I can put in a cartridge, I can play games on this thing. The controller might be a little stiff from older plastic and rubber, but this thing still works. And newer consoles have been questioned in terms of their longevity. First, it was because of hardware things, like, for example, the belt drives. So people were wondering, with the additional moving parts and belts from spinning discs instead of cartridges, would there be problems with the belt breaking in some of these consoles that shorten their lifespan because they're disc players, or would the laser wear out or something like that? It would have been nice if that was the thing people were concerned about with today's consoles. But now we have little gotchas like this CMOS thing. So, Sony, take a good hard look at the robustness of the retro market. People still playing Atari, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, even PlayStation 1, native on the original hardware. Not playing it on a PS2 or a PS3, native on the original hardware. Look at the robustness of retro gaming, and you decide whether or not you want to be the company that ruins a classic gaming tradition. I know there are modern alternatives to keeping old consoles alive. But do we really want a bunch of extra e-waste because a console is programmed essentially to self-destruct through some hidden gotcha in its system, like what we're facing right now with PS3? That's the thing. Hence the title of today's show, today's discussion. The world was better without self-destructing game consoles. I'm sorry. Planned obsolescence is enough of an insult when it comes to electronics. Never mind console gaming. If this is the way that consoles are going to go, then I might as well just go PC the whole way through. PC gaming. Between Steam, GOG, and other services, I'm in pretty good shape. Many of the games that I used to have that I could have previously used to justify buying a console are being ported to PC, even older games. Probably one of the biggest lessons that we've learned with gaming over the past few decades is that the idea of games being locked in a specific time period is no longer relevant or anything that's really good for them in the long run. It would just encourage piracy. Take, for example, how mobile has picked up with where Super Nintendo and N64 left off. Mobile had 2D games, and then mobile had some 2D games, and then eventually 3D games. Let's see. What's going to happen if that slips? Yeah, we don't want that. Wouldn't be cool if this thing fell to its doom on stream. We're going to put it down here. All right. We'll put it over there. This is a little too soft. Oh, this is the piano music. This is piano music. That's why there's barely any sound to it. There we go. We'll just advance the songs if need be. But yeah, YouTube, like console gaming. What's the point of it? I mean, I realize, you can buy a box that is the equivalent of a decent gaming PC with the Xbox Series X and the infamous plastic taco known as the PS5. Sorry. Wake me up when there's a blackout edition available. I don't want a plastic taco that's going to yellow or anything anytime soon. But, in the world of console gaming, consoles are becoming a thing where I don't know why you even have them anymore. They're basically crappier gaming PCs. And what would further accelerate the destruction of the console world than these little hidden gotchas where you can't have something like my original Super Nintendo still working all these years later. My original Nintendo 64 still working all these years later. And I'd have my original NES, 8-bit Nintendo, if my folks hadn't given it away when I was in college. It was a classic generational thing, much like my dad with his baseball card collection, where my grandparents gave away my dad's baseball card collection on him when he was off on his own. In my case, it was a console, my original NES. Well, the second one anyways. I had 2 Nintendos growing up. I wore out the first one. Yeah, I even dropped it a few times and chipped some of the plastic because I was a dumb kid that didn't know what he was doing in terms of taking care of some nice electronics. Got a second Nintendo, though. I was the original owner, and I used it for years from my remaining NES gaming all the way up until college. My folks gave it away when I was off at college. Oh, boy. Could get another one if I really wanted to, but the thing is, a lot of the Nintendo stuff, except for obscure titles and stuff that well, here's the thing. Most of my time nowadays goes to MMOs. I'm involved with ESO. ESO usually has plenty to do, to the point where I'm having trouble finding time for World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy anymore. And between that and my involvement in this online media stuff, I don't really see myself ever really playing a wide variety of video games, despite being older, out of school, etc., and working a job that sometimes has more flexible hours to where I have some more time during certain times of the year when things aren't as busy. So we have this sort of thing going on, but these gotchas and everything, it's just not much of a reason for me to stay involved with console gaming, especially when we've seen some of the things going on. Some of the mobile ports, for example. Mobile, before it had robust 3D capabilities, mobile picked up where consoles left off in terms of older games being interesting on them. And there's retro style games like what Shovel Knight kicked off, among other things. Then there's just about any Metroidvania game on Steam where it's made to look like an old Nintendo game, an old Super Nintendo game, maybe even an older PlayStation game. So I think the whole idea of generations of video games and the old stuff being locked away forever because of the passage of time is just gone at this point. There's going to be retro services. There's going to be people making emulator boxes with Raspberry Pis. There's going to be things like the NES Classic. There's going to be online stores. And there's going to be, in today's world, PC ports. And the PC ports are really getting wild on Square Enix's side. Here's Legend of Mana, which is in development for an early June release on Steam, an HD remaster of Legend of Mana. This is one of those PlayStation games that is one of the main reasons why I would even buy a PlayStation, for the back catalog, things like PS1 classics, so I don't have to track down the original PlayStation discs at collector's prices. But these remake projects are a great way to experience if they're done right anyways. Community recommendations. What? Can I just close that? Thank you, Steam. But these remakes are a way to, experience a lot of these classics if you don't have the original hardware, or if the original game is selling at collector's prices. So it's one of the few options that some people might have. And where's the room for console gaming if this keeps happening? We had Trials of Mana get remade last year. Legend of Mana is getting worked on. There's a Chrono Trigger remake, which not all that great. No, I don't want to see that. Shut up. It's Capcom weekend. Okay, let's look at this. How about we just do this? Steam powered, back it up. There we go. Use a back button. Pause. So we got all this stuff going on. Capcom Publisher Weekend. Woo! So what exactly is the point here? Unless you want to force people to buy the remakes, I don't know. But here's the thing. If I can't find any real justifying reason to have a console, why have a console? Nintendo could probably get away with it because the Switch has been what it is, and there's supposedly going to be a hardware revision of the Switch that finally lets it do 1080-60, so I can pick that up when that comes out. But that's really the only console I can justify having. And let's also not forget that there are precedents for the shutdowns of online services on consoles that you got to keep in mind here. The Wii, for example, online services were shut down, and I can still access stuff on the SD card. I don't know if there's a hidden gotcha on the Wii for when the battery on that system goes dead, but it's just the thing here. You want to know why people buy used games and why people are holding on for dear life to physical media in some circles? Because in the back of their minds, they're wondering if some kind of gotcha thing like this is going to happen. Are we going to run into a situation where some game console that we've enjoyed literally years of our life with, like, for example, those of us who grew up with NES, that's years of our childhood with the NES. It's fun to bust out an old school NES and play it again, even if the controller is stiff as all heck from years of chemical reactions in the rubber on the controls. Or we have to use a more modern controller, like maybe something like some of these controllers I've been seeing from, what was that again? Hyperkin, that's right. The Hyperkin Scout controller and stuff like that. I think the NES one was called something else, but you have Hyperkin controllers, you have people trying to recreate a retro experience. It used to be the case that old school controllers were basically for the emulator crowd, and the quality was iffy depending on whatever. but there's some pretty serious attempts at improving upon the design of the original controller for today's gaming world, like what Hyperkin's doing with a lot of their controllers. Like the Hyperkin Admiral for Nintendo 64, taking it into the wireless era and stuff like that. Or how about Hyperkin, I forgot which, I think was it the Captain or something? Something like that. There's a Hyperkin controller for the N64 that replaces the dust-prone analog stick from the original N64 controller with something more akin to the GameCube's analog stick. So you don't have a situation where Mario Party destroys your controller in like 2 months. But if you've ever had to deal with N64 controller dust, or your thumbstick on an N64 controller developing a wiggle zone, so to speak, then you'll know what I'm talking about. But there are some replacement parts simply because the design of the original thumbstick on the N64 controller was just garbage. I mean, in many ways, it's a first and a worst. Don't forget, Nintendo 64 went analog before PlayStation did. So PlayStation did a better job with the analog controllers for PS1 because they could iterate on what Nintendo had. But I remember, seeing an N64 demo in Walmart, and I couldn't figure out what the analog stick was for. So I was like, oh, it's a new Mario Kart game. I'm trying to play Mario Kart 64 with the D-pad, and I'm wondering why my guy is just crashing into a wall on Bowser's Castle. Then I saw some controllers of somebody holding the thumbstick, and I'm like, that's how you move? And then, of course, I tried it, and I liked it. Had plenty of practice on Cruisin' USA for the N64 and stuff along those lines. But this is the thing. And I think this is the big thing that Sony needs to think about with regards to how people view their old consoles, even the PS4. And on the Microsoft side, things like the Xbox 360, which is getting this kind of treatment as well. Despite the Red Ring of Death, despite Xbox One basically rendering the 360 obsolete, there might be some people out there that want to play cross-platform games on the 360 and not on an emulation service, or not on a retro service. So, what song is this? I want to keep track of these songs to see how much Stream Beats is playing and how much Ytal is playing. Let's just put that over here. So, that's probably the most important thing for companies like Sony to realize is that, look, this is years of someone's life that they're spending with this console. This is years of memories. It should not be the case that something that brought you so much enjoyment for a chunk of your life, especially a chunk of your young life, is made to essentially break after a certain time period. So right now, people are concerned about PS3 and losing the digital side of things. But then we have the question of what does it do on PS4? Someone's already trying to experiment with that, and they're seeing that even disc games get locked out. Look, I don't care that PS5 renders PS4 obsolete. There's going to be people out there whose memories are on PS4. That was the console of their childhood, and it has been made to break by design if this isn't addressed. No, there's got to be an end-of-life system update that turns off the DRM. Period. I mean, what exactly does the company have to worry about? People using old systems? You think about, for example, the jump from PS3, well, not so much from PS3 to original PS4, but PS3 to PS4 Pro. That was a jump in performance. So, and then, of course, from PS4 Pro and Xbox One X to Series X, and that sort of thing, to what we have now, once these consoles become more mainstream and more available. You have all of that going on. There's plenty of reason for people to not use old consoles forever and run the digital storefronts into the ground before finally upgrading. That's the thing. But if you have somebody who spent their childhood with like an Xbox One or a PS4, regular PS4, you can't be essentially time bricking, if we can use that as a term, combination of bricking and time bombing, so to speak. If anyone remembers what a time bomb malware attack is, it's an old school computer virus that would take effect at a certain date and time. So back in the day, we're going back to the 90s for that one. But what kind of bad taste do you think it leaves in people's mouths that the box that they played as a kid is made to break? If you're looking to make a whole bunch more PC gamers, please, by all means, keep it up. Because you know what? It's one thing if console makers want to be snooty about it. It's a completely different thing when publishers decide, you know what? Let the snooty hardware manufacturers just do their thing. We own the rights to our stuff. We're gonna re-release it on something newer, and we're gonna make it look better. So the whole remakes market has sprung up. Only people looking for the authentic experience or people in a very niche audience are going to seek out the original hardware. But part of the group that may want that authentic experience is people who grew up with a certain console. And again, my Super Nintendo from the 90s still works. N64 from the 90s still works. If my folks hadn't gotten rid of my NES would still work too. So, remember when consoles weren't made to break? Cartridge gamers remember. Cartridge era gamers remember. By cartridge, I don't mean what the Nintendo Switch has, the Nintendo DS has. Those are more like SD cards than the cartridges of old. But why should the ability to be able to just get nostalgic be something that is tied specifically to having grown up with cartridge consoles? And I know it's a thing. Not too long ago, I was at the 9 to 5, and some folks were chattering about, oh yeah, these are people like in their 30s, mind you. Yeah, my girlfriend found a Nintendo on Craigslist and a couple of games she bought, or nowadays it would be Facebook Marketplace. Like, yeah, my girlfriend bought an NES. We got it working somehow on our new TV, and she's playing Nintendo all the time again like she did when she was a kid, and she's loving it. There you go. Let me remind you of the power of nostalgia. Especially if it's a childhood thing. NES, no support for HD, no support for widescreen. Composite, unless you lived in certain EU areas or you had SCART cables and stuff. So limited graphics, limited video capabilities, limited everything, not even stereo sound. And people are seeking it out nowadays. What more needs to be said? So are we going to deny a generation that grew up on newer consoles the ability to do this later in life just for, what? Some extra money? As if these companies don't make enough as it is? If you want to make PC gamers out of everybody, please, by all means, console companies, keep it up. These remasters keep happening. These remakes keep happening. People making console killer PCs keep happening. And what's more, for some of these remake games that aren't as intensive on hardware, you can actually make a console killer PC and maybe run this off an APU or something to play these games. That's one of the things I'm curious about. So, for example, the Trials of Mana remake that came out last year. What kind of lower hardware can I play that on? Is it possible for me to play that on an APU and get 1080-60? That's something I'm really legit curious about. But that's the world we're heading towards. If it's not doable now, keep an eye on the technology. It probably will be doable at some point in the future. Because here's the thing. It seems like for the last several years, there's been a graphics card shortage every couple of years. Most of what you would want a graphics card for nowadays is 4K. But if an APU can do 1080-60, there's your baseline, and something you don't really lose too much if you drop back down to if you have a 4K TV. It's just going to be a little fuzzy until you get a new graphics card. But what if somebody who's playing older games or remakes of games that'll be just fine in 1080 indefinitely could just keep building new gaming PCs with more and more efficient hardware that can do that as our hardware continues to progress? So you see what I mean? You might as well let console gamers have their nostalgia. And this isn't just for Sony, this is for everybody. This isn't just for Sony, this is for everybody. Everybody who makes a console out there. This Nintendo, Microsoft, take notice. because let them have their nostalgia. Otherwise, what's the point of being a console gamer? There are very few games out there that aren't potential PC ports. I mean, once upon a time, as a PC gamer, you had your own ecosystem, and even the controllers were kind of blah. But now there's more crossover, like Xbox controllers that are available to be used for PC. Now you can use Xbox controllers. We have the same controllers as console players. Same controllers as console players, and Xbox even took it, Microsoft even took it a step further with the dual purchase games, where if you buy them on Xbox, you get them on PC and vice versa with the dual release games. So if you have Xbox, play it on Xbox. So I mean, we're sharing controllers with Xbox already. Folks I'd say at this point, it's too late for peripheral manufacturers to go back to the bad old days where PC controllers were always inferior by the major brands. So you're going to want something that's as good as a console if you're going to make a controller for PC. But even in this case, a game I picked up on Steam last night, Flower, originally for the PlayStation 3 digitally. It's one of those relaxing chill stream type games. Let's see here. Let's just advance the trailer to where it shows some game footage. There we go. Here's Flower on Steam. So, Flower has been ported over. Flower was ported over a while ago. I just missed it because I've had it on PS3 for years. But I've been curious about playing this on PC to see if there was, a way to play it on above 720p and stuff, but it is an older game. But here's the issue. Here's the issue here. If I play this on PC, like the one I just bought last night, as I found out last night, playing it on PC, you gotta use Xbox controller. There is no more motion controller for Flower. One of the things that made Flower fun to play on the PlayStation 3 was you could do this with the controller to move the flower petal around with the 6-axis. Doesn't exist on here, so the controls are a bit jerky when you're using thumbsticks. You could theoretically combine a hand with a mouse, but then you have to keep doing this with your mouse. You have to keep doing this with your mouse. So it's not as relaxing of an experience as just being able to do this. You played Flower the same way you played Warhawk. So I'd have to basically shop for a tilt sensing controller for PC in order to play it the way that I used to play it on PlayStation 3, or conversion software that allows me to hook up a PS3 controller to my system. But then I got to think about what if the battery goes dead, and then you put a new battery in the PS3 controller and stuff just to get 6-axis functionality. That's the thing. And does this PC port even support 6-axis functionality if you have a way of converting it over? That's the big question here. So, to an extent, there's got to be an experience of Flower that you really need to go back to the PC or to the PlayStation 3 in order to experience. Very, very nice, very, very relaxing game. As opposed to the stuff that's playing right now. Let's go to the song right after it. Okay, a little silly, but in a different way. Yeah, Flower on Steam, but you have to play it with regular controller stuff. You can't use the tilt stuff. Unless there's something a peripheral I can buy just for that. So, buying some new hardware just for one game, though, that's never been anything that's too popular. Witness how it seems like companies aren't making, like, zappers and super scopes anymore. Because even with the Wiimote, the Wii motion controls were good in a couple of games, but for the most part, trying to program for those didn't work out too well. A lot of times you were using your Wiimote as a divided controller with the nunchuck, where you just hold it like this and play it like it was a regular controller. So, yes. Yeah, but Flower, not the same as with the original controller. So, this thing was available digitally on PS3. There's a certain experience that if you lose access to that game on PS3, you're gonna basically lose the ability to have that experience ever again. Unless you find some way of configuring everything for this PC port to work properly. Or no, you can't do PS3 emulation. You can't do PS3 emulation either because there's no disc. So it's not like these people that like play PS2 games upscaled on their PC with whatever it is they have. So, yeah. This is the world we're heading towards as long as we tolerate self-destructing consoles. And furthermore, What about PS4? I don't think 6-axis came back for PS4, did it? PS4 controller, I don't think it did. DualShock 4 upgraded 6-axis motion sensors, notably more responsive compared to the DualShock 3 in supported titles. When is this from? What's the date? This is archived from the heck Game Facts. Why are you burying the dates on it? 7 years ago. Okay. Yeah, DualShock 4 apparently would support it. What about, say, you know, using this with PlayStation 5? So if I bought this on a store for PS5, 6-axis support for PS5 controllers. Did it make it over there? Let's see. DualSense Compatibility. Well, 6-axis has a Wikipedia article. DualShock 3. Etc. Was there a successor to it? Either way. Yeah, so that's the thing. There's certain experiences that you can't get if you have little gotchas built into your consoles. So, again, I still have my original Super Nintendo. It still works. And the robustness of the retro market for cartridge games and even early CD system games, not like CDI or anything, but like PlayStation 1 and stuff, all of this just points to just the fact that, look, it's part of the goodwill of a gaming company. It's part of the goodwill of a gaming company for you to make something that people can literally use till it physically breaks. Because then you say, yeah, well, I've had this console for 25 years and it finally broke, so, well, it had a good run. That's a very different reaction from a customer than finding out that their PS3 is going to have a little planned obsolescence when the CMOS battery dies. There's a bit of a difference between I had this console forever and it finally broke to Sony shut me off. So, if you want to make people into more PC gamers, you want to make more people into PC gamers, keep it up, because let me tell you something, even without the remakes, PC ports of games from all different kinds of generations are available on Steam. I can play games like Psychonauts, Brutal Legend, you know, the Final Fantasy games, originally for Windows 95 for Final Fantasy VII. Multiple redos on the PC. Most recent one, I think, is on Steam. There's also GOG as well. Good Old Games finds ways, and while we're talking about good old games, GOG finds ways with DOSBox emulators built in so that you can play old DOS games on PC and set the polling rate correctly so it doesn't run super fast if it's an old real mode game from the 90s or whatever. So, when there's a will, there's a way, and that way often happens on PC. So if PC becomes the platform where people are constantly figuring things out, and consoles become the platform where the console company is constantly snubbing you with hidden gotchas and artificial obsolescence, what do you think that does over the long haul? What do you think that does? If anybody wants to become a PC gamer because of this stuff, welcome. And I hope that the console companies take notice of this. There's going to be more of it. Because at some point you just get sick of it. And in the case of, if I grew up with a certain kind of console and I find out later on that it was made to break because of some gotcha like this, that'll leave a worse taste in my mouth if that's my childhood console than the people before me. What about the people that grew up with PS3? It's been around long enough. There's people that are nostalgic for Xbox 360 specifically, so they're trying to find 360s and play old 360 games. Maybe even with memory cards, or they put in their own hard drive or something along those lines. But, I mean, I've seen it. It started with Greenham Gaming a couple of years ago, but Xbox 360 nostalgia is a thing nowadays. What's to say there won't be PS3 nostalgia for certain PS3 titles? Yeah, see, let's see. Video results from the Google search. 2017, there was already 30. Oh, I remember the 32 megabytes channel. I gotta see if I'm still subbed to him. Maybe I'm just subbed and I'm not getting notifications. But yeah. So nostalgia videos. Nostalgic look at the Xbox 360. Xbox 360 nostalgia from July 2020 from SpotCam. June 2020 from Final Mofo. Nostalgia 360 from a guy whose name is a play on Super Saiyan. 2005 Xbox nostalgia from Reset Era. Xbox 360 nostalgia. I think that's a spoof video making fun of Red Ring of Death. People are making a nostalgic video showing the Xbox 360 default dashboard theme. So yeah, Xbox 360 nostalgia is a thing. Despite all the backward compatibility that that Microsoft's been playing with lately. Despite all the backward compatibility that's available, Phil Spencer and his buddies have done a really good job of being apparently friendlier than Sony has. You know, I said this years ago, you know. I talked about how Steam and these PC services basically allow you to keep your game library across hardware generations and upgrades. And a long time ago, not a long time ago, but a couple of years ago, I talked about this idea that oops, watch the mic. I talked about this idea a while back. Why can't consoles essentially be tickets into that ecosystem for everything that's specific to a platform? So everything that's Xbox specific is on Xbox. Everything that is PlayStation specific is on PlayStation. But in the absence of that, we've seen revenge from rights holders and stuff like the Legend of Mana remake. So, yeah. There we go. So, if people associate consoles with planned obsolescence and little gotchas like this, where's the future of console gaming? Sports games, where it's socially acceptable to be buying the same game every year? Where's the future of console gaming? Legit question. Because if the software publishers are going to not be beholden to what the hardware folks want to do, unless there's some stuffy rights agreement in there somewhere, why keep console gaming? And let's not even, don't even get me started on the whole controller problem. This is an Xbox One controller. There's like an additional button on the Series X controller, I think. But I think these are compatible with the Series X. The joke is that you have to buy a whole new $50 controller just because they added a button. So, and I've done videos on way too many game controllers before. Just how easy it is to have way too many gaming controllers because you have too many generations of game consoles. So even PC gaming. As PC gaming has evolved, we went from like Logitech controllers, and those kept getting better every iteration as they copied the consoles more and more. So you kept buying new controllers because they were objectively better than the other ones you had available that did X input or direct input and then eventually X input. There's converters nowadays if you play old direct input games. And of course, you can always there's a Logitech controller with a switch that hard switches between the two if you don't want to deal with software. But PC controllers got better, and then eventually some genius decided, let you use console controllers on PC, and now here we are. PC gaming shares controllers with Xbox, minimum. So, you have all of this going on. Way too many controllers. Gotchas in the hardware. The ability for an entire digital library that may represent the most authentic experience that you have with a certain title, depending on whether it ever had a physical release. Potentially getting locked out of that because of some hardware screwball thing like the dead CMOS battery issue. Why be a console gamer anymore? Aren't you sick of it yet? Aren't you sick of PC gaming finding more solutions on this side of things, with the consoles manufacturing more problems on their end? Are you tired of the proprietary crap? Are you tired of your Xbox breaks, so either Microsoft sends you an advanced replacement or you gotta wait for it to come back? as opposed to, oh yeah, I'll just use a different PC and just shift my account information over. You know, 20 years ago, there was a lot of problems with DRM in PC gaming. Steam largely was the catalyst to that ending. Now there's GOG, which is an explicitly DRM-free service. But the idea of using an account sign-in to limit access to software seems to have worked pretty fine as is. So you have Steam, you have Origin, you have Epic Games Store. You have plenty of services to choose from to build up a library of software where if your PC fries or whatever, you play it on something else. Or maybe, you know, we're heading towards like what I want for APUs. I want to see AMD release a Ryzen APU that can do 1080-60 without a graphics card. When that happens, that is a milestone moment. That's a watershed moment for PC gaming because you get a 1080-60 console out of a PC without a graphics card, and then you just upgrade for 4K support. Or maybe above 60 frames per second in 1080, like if you're playing first-person shooters or something, or maybe 1440p 120 or something. But the bottom line is you get a decent gaming experience without a graphics card. That will be huge when that happens, but that's the pattern. Between everything we've talked about, PC gaming fixes things. No, console gaming, problems. PC gaming, solutions. How much longer does this pattern need to continue before console folks wake up and realize there's not much of a reason to be a console gamer except maybe exclusives that are exclusive for how long? I mean, there's so much to play out there between games that you don't get around to now and maybe games you didn't get around to earlier that you could completely blow off exclusives until they're no longer exclusive. Whoop-de-doo! You may not be able to stream it and have it be as popular. You might not be able to get involved in the discussions because some of your friends went out and shelled out the $60 for the brand new release. Whoop-de-doo! You lose a little bit of that over the long haul of a game's period where people enjoy it, which is often years, maybe even decades. Wow. So riveting. I think if I was in that situation where I had friends that were going out and buying every new release, regardless, just because it was new, I'd probably just I want better friends, actually. You know, if I was the stick in the mud who wasn't shelling out $60 every single time a new game came out, and I was constantly having to just sit there and listen to them brag about the game, maybe I'd want better friends or something. But and let's also not forget the beta on release problem. Don't you just love it when you try to be a cutting-edge gamer and get the brand new game to find out you're essentially playing an extended beta until some massive patch makes the game the way it should have been when it was released? Skyrim was the worst for me in that one. The Markarth quest, the main quest in Markarth was bugged when Skyrim first came out, and I played through so much of Skyrim very soon after launch. They didn't want to delay it for a quarter, but guess when the patch came out that finally fixed a lot of the big bugs, including the Markarth glitch? 3 months later. A quarter later. They should have delayed it. But it would have been peeing on the sacred cow, so to speak, or golden calf, or whatever analogy you want to use here, for them to miss the Christmas rush. Boy, wouldn't that have been something. Darn it, those darn holiday sales, because games never find ways to be successful if they're good when they're released sometime other than Christmas. Or when games are good, they miss Christmas, they don't get a surge of people buying them the following Christmas. Really. Money. Gotta have that money as soon as possible, don't you, big gaming companies? Don't you, big AAA developers? Don't you, big hardware developers? And again, my original consoles still work. Decades later. I can grab my Super Nintendo and it'll work. Put a game in, turn it on. No nonsense. N64. Grab a game. No nonsense. Is this what you want to do to newer generations of gamers who grew up with newer consoles? And if even the 360 is a source of nostalgia nowadays, Is this where you want to sour people away from console gaming for good? You know how many times people have done commentaries and whatnot saying console gaming is gonna die, console gaming won't last another generation? Would you like that to be true? If you work for the PlayStation or the Xbox division of these companies, of Sony and Microsoft or whatever, you want that to be true? The world was better without self-destructing consoles, period. Some other things we can take a look at here that I have in the browser. The classic YouTube experience, I now have one of the biggest, 318 videos and counting. I have one of the biggest classic YouTube experiences available on this platform now. So there was another playlist that had like 200-something videos. Now I've cracked the 300 video mark. Go here. You get a little thing with YouTube's animated logo from SLN Media. That, while this 10-second thing is playing, turn on shuffle in the player. Hit play all, and while this is playing, turn on shuffle, and you'll get a nice nostalgic YouTube experience, which might take your mind off of this ongoing problem with the modern YouTube experience. And we're going to have to cut the size of this in half to showcase this. So, there's a bit of a problem with YouTube streaming right now. Let's see, right about here should be good. There's a bit of a problem with YouTube streaming right now where the save as new option, and I'm not going to save changes to this video, the save as new option is not available. YouTube, fix that or you are losing to Twitch. Here's the thing. You can technically download, edit, re-upload to make spin-off videos, but why do you want to go to all that trouble and use all that bandwidth, especially when YouTube has a cloud editor, which I imagine somebody at YouTube somewhere wants people to use. Otherwise, why is it still here? So the ability to create spin-off videos, it needs to be available. Whether it's somebody who streams about 3 different topics and turns the stream in the cloud into 3 different YouTube videos or whatever, it's about giving people choice on what they want to watch without having to arrow around or click around a stream replay for everything. So this isn't working. This isn't working right now. When Save As New comes back, it'll be nice. It hasn't been working in about 2 days or so. Hope YouTube fixes it. But I've talked about how certain features on YouTube go up and down, so to speak, and this is one of those examples. But there we go. Hopefully YouTube fixes that. All right, about 7:30 at the Geek House. We'll let this convert over. Let's talk about what the experiment was last night, the thing we were talking about earlier. Or yesterday, actually. So here's the thing. Stream monetization on YouTube is years behind video monetization, so you can breathe wrong and get demonetized with YouTube streaming setup. But here's the question. Something like this on YouTube has 2 phases in its life. Live and after the fact. Now, if people enjoy something you create for years after the fact, is a couple hours of being live and the pennies you might make from ad revenue from a monetized stream really worth it? This is one of the arguments on Twitch right now with pre-rolls and mid-rolls. Since Twitch doesn't have the kind of evergreen strengths that YouTube has, there really isn't the opportunity for the ad impressions and whatnot to make more money for Twitch when people aren't streaming. So the emphasis again is on live. Yet another problem with make a slide. Make a slide. Make a darn slide. I'm going to sound like a YouTube elitist again, but if I'm right, I'm right. You know? Your feelings about the facts don't change whether or not the facts are facts. So let's see. It's not a big project for a streamer to go to YouTube. Let's save that. Now let's go into here. Not a big project for a streamer to go to YouTube. Save that off, and let's make a new slide. Swap over to generic J slides, and let's make a new slide, title and content. All right, let me just chime in. Let's just talk about this to round out our discussion tonight after we spent all that time talking about consoles here. And unfortunately, I can't make a spin-off video out of this very easily, so... Oh well, YouTube's got to fix their stuff here. But hey, you know, this is the sort of thing where, who cares? Take the slide over to Twitter when we're done. Alright, let's do this. Twitch's ad problem is due to their live-only problem. I want to bold that, though. There we go. Wait, what? This is supposed to be title and content. Give me the text, then. New slide. I think I did title only by mistake. Yeah, I did hit title only by mistake. Title and content. There we go. Now, that makes a lot more sense. There we go. Get rid of the old slide here. Twitch's ad problem is due to their live-only problem. Currently, there's a problem on Twitch with pre-rolls versus mid-rolls. And this is at the center of that. This is at the center of that discussion right now about streamers taking ad breaks. So, here's the thing. This ties back to the weaknesses of Twitch's overemphasis on live. Due to the overemphasis on live, this means the majority of ad impressions are going to come from live streams when the streamer is live. A stronger evergreen presence would take the pressure off of live streams in terms of ads. But Twitch doesn't have that. So, the argument is over streamers taking enough ad breaks. Hence, the problem with streamers taking... whether streamers take enough ad breaks. And all of the stuff that they're doing to try and encourage streamers to run ads during their streams. Then there's pre-roll versus mid-roll, the mid-roll timer, things like that. It is so important for when you're live because there isn't really much else in terms of impressions. And people aren't really conditioned to watch Twitch for anything other than live. If Twitch is going to make anything significant off of ad revenue, it needs to be something that is done when someone's live, because that's where most of the impressions are going to come from. So, on YouTube, with the ironic twist of right to monetize, partners fixed it automatically. Good. I was taking a roll in the dice on that one. On YouTube, with the ironic twist of right to monetize, partners' new main ad benefit is controlling their ad breaks. So with that in mind, YouTube streamers can disable ad breaks on streams and eliminate this annoyance for viewers. And even if they have ad breaks, will that fix? It didn't. Even if they have ad breaks, is that a real word then? Barack? I know Barack Obama and everything, but yeah. YouTube's the name Barack Obama. Don't get any ideas, you weird internet people. YouTube streamers can disable ad breaks on streams and eliminate this annoyance for viewers. And even if they have ad breaks, see here. And even if they have ad breaks, YouTube ads have a skip button. So here's the kicker here. YouTube streams have two phases. Live and evergreen. Is it worth chasing pennies? Is it worth chasing pennies? Is it worth chasing pennies for ad impressions while live instead of evergreen? Nope. And there's the advantage of YouTube for YouTube streamers. Therefore, YouTube streamers can skip ads on stream and turn them on later, and the platform will still get impressions from the long haul. Just flip those two around there. Your move, Twitch. Nice slide to send over to Twitter here. But there you go. The latest of many, many reasons why Twitch should look to expand into more support for video, because it's one of the few ways they can solve their ad impression problem. Twitch needs to become more known for video, and instead they've been going in the wrong direction for the last couple of years. Just figured I'd throw that in. So, what does this all have to do with today's discussion? Well, for the administrative update on things, this is a little too dubsteppy for what I want to talk about. There we go. A little synthwave. That's a little too loud anyways. Jingle punks. Alright. So, one of the things I've decided to do is, because of the state of monetization on YouTube right now, is to go back to the system of not trying to monetize the streams. Why chase... Let's just leave the slide on screen. Why chase pennies? Why chase pennies when this is part of the problem on Twitch right now? And people are upset at Twitch for too many ads. I think it would be better for YouTube streamers to not bother with ads and then just design their streams so that they can be converted into something that can have ads later. Because now, if you like what you see, send in a super chat, buy a channel membership, etc. But I think maybe YouTube streams crossing too much dotting the I's, crossing the T's for YouTube streamers to chase after a ton of ad impressions from streams. Just the way it is. I mean, if you're going to primarily be a streamer, that might be something to think about, but yeah. Twitch would have less issues with wondering about all these ad impressions if they could get ad impressions for something other than streams. I mean, think about it. It's a bit of a trade-off, don't you think? Now, poking around, watching stuff that's after the fact, or maybe catching up on the VOD from yesterday, you might get an ad every so often, versus when the streamer's live and you don't want to miss anything. You're not really missing anything when you're playing back a video from earlier. Handy, that's very interesting to think about here. So, YouTube. Now you need to fix your save as new thing in order for me to make a spin-off video of that discussion about Twitch's ad problem separate from the stream. As it stands, the only option I have is to cut that out, or otherwise download, edit, re-upload. And who wants to do that when you've spent all this time creating this cloud editor that works really well when it works? Well, we'll save that for later. We'll save that for later, and if that feature comes back, we'll use it. For now, though, we're heading towards 8 o'clock in the evening at the Geek House. My plan for tonight was streams, then stream, then chores, then videos. So, start the chores a little early. Doesn't look like people really give a darn about this anyways, even though it's tech-related. And again, this is the thing. It's not about the technology. It's not about the tech videos. Because even if I stream stuff about techie or gaming topics like this, the results speak for themselves. So, really, the only thing you can really do on YouTube or any other platform is what you want to do. Because if nobody shows up for the live stream, or nobody watches the YouTube video, the only thing you have to go off of, in terms of whether you feel like you're wasting your time, is whether or not you like what you've made. And this is fundamentally the main reason why the content you will always make as a content creator the most consistently is the stuff you like the most, not necessarily stuff your audience likes the most. I rest my case. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay signing off. Thanks for stopping by.